Americans, to win wars in the Middle East, they use bombs, they use propaganda, and they use money. Personally, I think the strategy won't work. First of all, bombs don't really work with the geography of Iran. Remember, Iran, it is a mountainous terrain. So it's a huge country. It's 3 times the size of Iraq. So I'm not convinced that airstrikes will do any real lasting damage to the infrastructure of Iran. Propaganda, New York Times, CNN, BBC have absolutely no credibility today, not even among Western domestic audiences. They'll have even less credibility in Iran. And then you have money. And I don't know how effective money will be, because at the end of the day, what differentiates Iran from, say, Libya, Syria, and Iraq is the people in Iran consider themselves Persians. In other words, they consider themselves heirs to a brilliant, creative civilization that's been around for 5,000 years. And I can't overstate enough how that would energize and motivate the people to resist and to unite together. Also, what's really important is the Iranians saw exactly what happened to the Iraqis. This once vibrant, harmonious, brilliant nation was destroyed by American sanctions and American airstrikes. So I don't think that the Americans have a compelling case to make before the Iranian people. So another way of saying this is that even though it seems the Americans have the military advantage, they are still the greatest military in human history. The problem, though, is the Iranians have much more strategic flexibility. And what I mean by that is the Americans, to overthrow this regime, need to decapitate the leadership. They need to create internal dissent, a revolution, and they need to rally the religious minorities against the regime in Tehran. Okay, and that's really the main strategy moving forward, and really real path to victory for the Americans. Whereas the Iranians have much more strategic flexibility. Okay, so in other words, America and its allies in the Middle East have major strategic vulnerabilities. For example, let's take Saudi Arabia. Well, Saudi Arabia has 2 vulnerable resources that the Iranians at any time can strike at through their proxies, the Houthis, right? You have the desalination plants, which is the only source of fresh water for Saudi Arabia. If you knock out the desalination plants in Saudi Arabia loses all its fresh water in 2 weeks' time, and there's no way of replenishing that fresh water. Then, of course, you have the oil fields, which are extremely vulnerable to rocket attacks. So, Saudi Arabia, the main U.S. ally of Arab nations in the Middle East, it's extremely vulnerable to Iranian attacks. Then you have the Strait of Hormuz, which controls a great deal of the world's trade. If Iran closes that off, then that cuts off not just oil to East Asia, but it cuts off revenue for American allies like Oman, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar. And the last strategic vulnerability is you have all sorts of American bases throughout the Middle East, especially in Kuwait, especially in Saudi Arabia, Qatar. And these are legitimate military targets if America declares war on Iran. So the American people are not in favor of this war, then it's less likely that American consumers will be able to absorb high oil prices and inflation that this war would inevitably cause. So I would say the main advantage going into this war, just from a geopolitical, analytical perspective, I would say it's very much in favor of the Iranians. This does not mean that the Americans and Israelis will not be able to inflict tremendous damage on a nation. I mean, if America and Israel continues its bombing campaign, which I suspect it will for the next few months, then we will see tremendous damage and economic loss within Iran. But ultimately, war is not decided by resources, weapons, or technology. It's really decided by a people's willingness to fight and die for what they believe in. And I think when it comes to this question, then I think the Iranians have a huge advantage over the Americans. Also, let's not forget that the Iranians have been studying American strategy in the Middle East for the past 20 years. And I'm pretty sure they developed counter strategies against an American attack. And I think the main counter strategy is the idea of decentralization. You've got these different militias, different cells embedded in different parts of Iran. So even though America and Israel, they may be able to decapitate the leadership, they may be able to knock out the central leadership in Tehran, they won't be able to occupy the country. And unless they're able to occupy the country and install a military regime that's to their liking, then this war is not won. Then Iran is still a functioning threat to American Middle East interests.